to start by way of karakia first, because that's our Māori tikanga. Mr. Waisanamo, and he's going to take the floor and take karakia.
I got involved in radiation issues about 12 years ago when Telecom decided they wanted to put a 25-metre cell tower about 5 metres from the sandpit at the Kaitaia Play Centre where my children went. And I was really busy and I've got so many things to do, but everyone said, no, so you're an environmental lawyer, you have to come and help us with this because it can't be right. And you sort of thought, well, you know, they must have some laws on this, there must be some rules. Surely this wouldn't be happening if it wasn't safe. But I thought, okay, I better get involved and I better have a look. And the more I started looking, the more I started asking more questions and saying, hang on, what is going on here? Why is nobody getting control of this? Why are they not stopping this? And so we had a really great community in Nelson, and we actually stopped that cell tower going 5 metres from the Kaitaia Play Centre sandpit. And along the way, we made submissions to Parliament, we made a little video, Dear Helen Clark, where we had people from the community speaking out a sentence each and telling a story about why we didn't want cell towers everywhere. And our petition went really well in Parliament. They actually agreed with us that the advisory committee and the government should be changed to have independent advisors instead of just telco advisors on a health committee, because telco advisors probably weren't the best people advising on a health committee. And they agreed with us that the New Zealand standard, which way back then was way too old, agreed should be reviewed. And it was an awesome start. We thought, hey, this is all pretty good. And while we were doing that, in another room in Parliament, they were changing the law and changing the regulations to make an exemption for cell towers from the Resource Management Act that said that you could put up a cell tower and assume that radiation from it was safe and you didn't need any public consultation with anybody. So it was a really big learning lesson for me about what goes on in Parliament when the select committee that listened to the people said we need more stricter rules, and then the Minister then of the Environment, who was Trevor Mallard, said no, we don't need to consult with the people at all. So I stayed really interested in that issue. And in a way you can blame me, I guess, in our group for making a fuss then that they passed these exemption regulations, which is why we're having this issue with 5G now, sneaking out all around New Zealand with a deliberate strategy of not consulting. And the strategy is to keep it under the radar, just keep it really quiet, just a tower here, a tower there, a tower there. And by the time the public notice what's going on, hey, too bad, it's too late, it's all here. So that has been the strategy on 5G. Now what's happened is, as people have started realising what's going on, they've been talking to each other and saying, hey, but we don't want a cell tower outside our kids' bedroom window, we don't want a cell tower outside the school, we don't want one next to the hospital, what can we do about this? So we've had a whole series of these meetings all around the country with different groups coming together, and it's getting a huge momentum coming. Last Saturday was a global day of protest for 5G, and I think we had over 25 communities around New Zealand protesting, something like 37 communities around the world, all protesting on the same day. And one country, and I always mix up whether it's Slovakia or Slovenia, but anyway, it's a small country in Europe, that one country actually has stopped it. Their government is having an election now, and one of the key issues is 5G and whether they're going to have it or not. So I wanted to give you a story about the history, about the hope right at the start, because we need a lot of hope and we need a lot of people power and we need a lot of energy, because the whole system is designed to stop us having a say, and we need to work together and know that there is hope and we can make a difference when we do all stand together and say, hey, hang on, what's going on, we don't want this. Just by background, so I studied biochemistry and microbiology at school and university, and so I've got a science degree before I studied law, and I originally worked as an environmental health officer for the Department of Health in Wellington and then in Auckland, and my job was to assess environmental risk and identify risks and to help clean up those risks and manage those risks. And then I went on and studied law, and I worked for private law firms, big law firm in Auckland, smaller law firm in Nelson. I was a partner in a specialised law firm in Nelson. When I worked for the Department of Conservation as their lawyer, and amazingly, when I worked for them, they believed everything I said. The day I no longer work for them, they suddenly try and act like I don't know what I'm talking about. So I'm pretty sceptical of how the system works. I've got a pretty good understanding of how it works, so I'm really keen to try and share it with you, because once you understand a few things, it all makes a lot more sense. I also want to thank the Cara here about water, because whether we're talking 5G or whether we're talking the removal of our water, whether we're talking the pollution, 1080, many of these other issues, whether we're talking sovereignty, it's actually pretty much the same issue. And it's really important to listen to the modus operandi and understand the modus operandi, because then we get some tools to unravel what's going on, and by finding other like-minded groups that are working on similar issues, we can work together and we can learn a lot from each other, and we can support each other, and we can create a critical mass of people. And when we've got a critical mass, we can do anything. But we have to get that critical mass first. If it's one person and they're working day and night and struggling and sending letters and everything, it's really, really hard. But when you've got a group of people working together, it actually is good fun. You meet some great people, you feel like you're making a difference, and you can be really proud of what you're doing. It's so much more fun. So it's really, you know, the thing with 5G, when I first started working on 5G, everyone's going like, what's 5G? I don't know anything about 5G. I'm really busy. I've got all these other issues. I haven't really got time for any more issues. Then I learned with 5G that nobody knew anything about 5G. And the government that's approved it, they don't know anything about 5G either. And you know, the telcos that are rolling it out all around our communities and all around the world, they actually don't know much about it either. They are still trying to develop it to make it work as they roll it out. So they haven't done years of testing and making sure it's safe. It's completely the opposite. They're actually struggling to get it working operationally, let alone check. They've done no testing on whether it's safe or not. So it's really important. If you think you don't know anything about 5G, you are not alone. And that is one of the very reasons why we all have to be learning as much as we can and asking as many questions as we can. Because it is potentially really, really dangerous, because what we do know about 5G and we do know about radiation is it interferes with it's electrical energy. And so the electrical energy, our body works, our brain works with electrical energy as well. So there's a potential for that electrical energy to interfere with the way our brain works. And we know that it can affect our mental health, it can affect our physical health, it can affect our DNA, it can affect our cell membranes, so the leakiness of our cells, so what passes through and what doesn't pass through. It can affect the way our proteins in our body work, so that's our enzymes in our body, and they change shape and they turn on and they turn off to do different things depending on the environment. So if you change the environment of your body with radiation, it can turn them on when they shouldn't be on, and it can turn them off when they shouldn't be off. So although it's something that's invisible, it's got a lot of power on the way it affects us. So it's so important that we're aware it's there. And when I first worked with the cell tower in Nelson at High Place Centre and tried to stop that, I always thought, you know, if it had this like smelly green gas coming out of the towers, it would be great because everyone could see it and everyone go, no, this is dangerous, we don't want it. But because it's invisible, we tend to treat it as okay. But we actually know that there are plenty of poisons that are invisible and plenty of poisons that do all sorts of harm, but it's just really easy to accidentally ignore them. So there's different wavelengths of energy, and the energy that we're talking about for current cell phones is longer wavelengths than the ones we've got for 5G. So the 5G are right down at what's called microwave wavelengths. When we get it, so it's very, very short. And very, very short means a very, very high energy. So there's a lot of energy buzzing around a very short little wavelengths. It is a little bit of a trick to this because what the government tells us is at one end of the spectrum is ionising radiation. The ionising, they say, is like nuclear radiation they admit that causes harm to cells. They say that if it's the other end, you don't need to worry about it and it's safe. Now, it is a trick because actually it still is very harmful. And we know it's very harmful because there's been a lot of research on all of the different wavelengths. So so what the 5G radiation is using all of the old 3G and 4G while they're getting it up and running, and on top of that they're bringing in the 5G, which is the very, very short microwave frequency radiation, so all of the concerns that we had from the other ones are there, but what's really concerning with the 5G when they bring it out is they're going, because it's very, very short, it doesn't travel very far, and they're going to need to have a tower every 100 metres or so. Every 100 metres or so. And because it's very short, it doesn't go through surfaces, so it doesn't go through trees. So they're applying to the councils for exemptions that they can prune trees that interfere with radiation. So they're basically amputating trees because they're having a tower every 100 metres and any tree that gets in the way is not working. So they're basically amputating the trees. Now there's also real concerns with that frequency with bees and insects because they're very small. The energy is going, like most of the energy is going in the first few millimetres. So if you are a very small thing like a bee, it's basically heating you and all of that energy is going into the body, and they know that it's causing a lot of harm to the bees by heating them up, but also to their direction. Now with people, there's some people saying you don't need to worry too much because it is only microwave radiation, it's not going to go so far into the body. But the problem is our skin, as Professor Lazinski says, is not just an overcoat. Our skin is the biggest organ of our body. And if we're exposing our skin to radiation, it's doing all kinds of things to the skin and to the microflora on the skin, and to the immunity. Our skin has a lot of input into our immune system, so it's making a lot of change to the way that our skin can protect our body. Now, none of this has been specifically studied. They've done the preliminary studies so that they know that it changes our skin, but they don't know exactly what harm it does do. They've only done a handful of studies trying to work this out, but the one of the ones they have done is they exposed the nose of a rat to this microwave radiation, thinking that, okay, it might do something to the nose, but that's it. It actually affected its heart and its brain as well. So the hormones and the messages in the skin are sending messages all around the body. So they don't know how it works, but they do know that if you microwave radiate the nose of a rat, the skin on the nose, it changes the whole behaviour around the rat and the physiology of the rat. So that's one of the things to think about. Now, what the government try and tell us with radiation is there are no health effects or no known health effects. Now, that known is a really important thing because what they're telling us is they're basically admitting that they don't know. They only know a little bit about it. But what they do is the way they work it out, anything that they don't know 100%, that hasn't been in published research, and that they don't understand how it works, they treat that as not being an effect. Okay, so just think about that. So they only treat it as an effect if they've done a lot of research and they can repeat the research and get the same answer, and they understand how it's getting that outcome, then they would admit that it's an effect. So everything that's causing some change to the human body or an animal body or a tree or whatever else that they don't understand, that's treated as something that we don't know, it's uncertain, so let's assume it's safe. Now, it's really interesting because a lot of my other work is with medicinal cannabis law reform. And medicinal cannabis is the opposite, something that's been used for 4,000 years by all the generations, or civilizations all over the world. With medicinal cannabis, they say you can't use it until we can prove it's safe. So all of the uncertainty there is, well, you can't use it until it's proven safe. But with radiation, that's brand new, and they're still developing it and rolling it out, and they don't even know how they're going to get it to work. They say, well, we'll assume it's safe until it's proven to be dangerous. So this is the kind of tricky things that they do, and then they write in these nice little articles in the Ministry of Health website and things saying, well, there are no health effects from radiation. So they can't say there are no health effects from radiation because it's not true, but all they're saying is there are no health effects from radiation that we recognise with our way of looking at it. But they don't say that extra bit when they say it on their website, which is why it's so tricky. So that's one of the things to look out for. Now, the other thing to look out for with the information is they say, oh, but it meets the New Zealand standard. So you think, well, that's good. We've got a New Zealand standard. Great. Well, the New Zealand standard was written in 1999, and it was written based on advice from a group of telco experts. So the telcos have got their own organisation called ICNIRP, which is registered in Germany, and they choose scientists who say what they want to hear. And any scientist that is nervous about harm from radiation is never invited onto the ICNIRP committee, the advisory committee. They're very cautious about who they choose. So ICNIRP, back in 1998, wrote a standard for protecting against what they call the heating effects of radiation. So the heating effects are what will increase your body 1 degree, the tissue of your body 1 degree from the radiation, based on studies they did on army people, who basically big men, and full-size heads and full-size bodies. So they tested these men and they worked out this is how much radiation you can have. And then they worked out, but later on they worked out, the cell phones actually can't quite work in those standards, so we'll call the ear not really part of the body. And then they say, if you hold your cell phone between 18 and 25 millimetres away from your body, and you don't count your ear as being part of your body, you'll be safe within the standard for cell phones. This is the kind of things they do because they're focused on operational things. They're actually not too focused on our health. So anyway, so they did the standard in 1998 for the International Telco Organisation, ICNIRP. The New Zealand expert team was put together. Now, to be on that team, you had to be able to volunteer your time free of charge. You had to be available to go to Wellington and attend the meetings. And naturally enough, the telcos volunteered quite a few of their staff to go on the advisory committee, but not many just normal people could commit that time and energy and have the level of skill to be on the advisory committee. So we ended up with an advisory committee. They started with an Australian group as well, but it ended up just in New Zealand. There was one guy who wasn't working for the telco industry, and about 9 or 10 guys who were working for the telco industry. And so they then adopted the standard that the Telco's International Group had recommended that protects against the heating effects, that's designed to protect heating effects for an army guy. And they said, okay, we'll call this the standard for New Zealand. And it says at the front of that standard, it only protects against these heating effects, heating up your body. And it says at the front of it, it's not intended to protect against heart pacemakers and other electronic body parts. So if you've got a pacemaker, that standard won't protect you. And they say in their introduction that we don't really know enough about all these biological effects that people talk about, the DNA damage and the mental health damage and all these other effects. We don't know about them, so we'll just ignore them. We'll just have this standard that protects against this heating effect. So when so that became the New Zealand standard, and you know, it was just a standard, it wasn't law or anything. But then in 2008, the Minister for the Environment then adopted it into our law and said, if your emissions meet that standard, we'll pretend that, well, they didn't say pretend, I say they pretend, they said we will deem it to be safe and you can't complain about it. When they say it complies with the New Zealand standard, they're not actually saying it's safe. All they're saying is it complies with this completely irrelevant standard that's got nothing to do with causing harm. And indeed, as a standard that is 1,000 times more lenient than some of the standards around the world. This is about the New Zealand standard, and this is the level that Australia, Canada, and allow 1,000, or they call it, there's different units, but basically we'll call it 1,000. India and Israel, their standard is 1/10 of the New Zealand standard. China, Lithuania, Russia, Italy, Poland, their standard is 1/10 again. So if they say, oh, well, it's okay, it's only 1% of the New Zealand standard, it's basically right at the maximum of the standard. When you get Switzerland is roughly the same, but Switzerland's got an extra precautionary standard if you're with schools and hospitals and for more sensitive locations. So we're about 100 times as much as the normal Swiss standard and 200 times as much as the more sensitive areas. And then when you come over here, there's a few countries that are more precautionary. Interestingly, Salzburg, Austria, their standard, I'm really having trouble with this, Salzburg in Austria, their standard was actually written because of the advice of the New Zealand scientist Neil Cherry, who was a world expert in radiation. It's been adopted in Salzburg, but it's not been adopted pretty much anywhere else in the world. But so when they say, so one of the tricks I wanted to point out that to watch out for, they say it complies with the New Zealand standard, it actually doesn't really mean anything. It doesn't mean anything at all. And when they say, oh no, but it's non-ionising radiation, it doesn't actually mean anything at all, because ionising radiation, yes, it definitely causes harm, but non-ionising radiation also definitely causes harm. And we know that it definitely causes harm because the World Health Organisation now recognises that there's been a lot of cancer studies from non-ionising radiation, so from cell phones. They did a big study called the Interphone study, and it got published. It took them a long time because they were haggling about how to describe it. But the Interphone study, if you use your cell phone half an hour a day for 10 years, after 10 years, you've got a significant increase in a risk of brain tumours. And half an hour a day, they called a heavy user. Now, a lot of people would say that's not that much of a heavy user. I use this thing on my cell phone now because I don't like holding it near my brain. It's a little bit of an exaggeration, but it's kind of fun as well. But it's really, really important with all these things. Like, you know, we're not saying don't use any of this technology. The message is use it, but be mindful about it. Be mindful about the risks. And be aware and get the information and then choose what's right for you. You know, use it, don't put it in your pocket, because if you're a guy and you want to have babies, it's going to damage your sperm. And if you're a girl and you want to have babies, it's probably going to damage your eggs. Don't put it next to your heart, because it's going to interfere with the way your heart rhythm. There's a lot of cases of that happening. And don't put it next to your brain, because we need our brains. So, you know, just be aware. It's not saying never use it, but just be aware. So anyway, the Interphone study said if you use your cell phone for more than half an hour a week, half an hour a day, after 10 years, there's a significant increase in brain tumours. Now, that is not a heating effect that our New Zealand standard protects against. That's what's called a biological effect. It's another more subtle effect that we don't really totally understand, but we know it happens. And I use the analogy, if you bake a cake, it doesn't matter whether or not you understand the chemistry of what reaction is going on when you mix your eggs and your flour and your sugar and everything else, you still get a cake whether you understand the chemistry or not. You get the changes that will happen. And it's the same for radiation. We know we know it changes the DNA and it changes the way your body works. We don't know how necessarily, the details. We've got a pretty good idea now, but we're learning on that. Sorry, you've got a question?
Those countries were 100 points and below, are those countries going to be rolling out 5G, or are they not able to because of those limits?
Yeah, so the 5G is still, it's been rolled out only in a few places so far, and they rolled it out in one part of Switzerland, for example, and then the other states, because they have like regions that make their own decisions, so they rolled it out in one region and the other regions got like, we don't want this, and the public stopped it in the regions there. Technically, I don't know what test results they've had, whether it technically meets the standard or not. I haven't seen any results on that. What's happened in New Zealand where they've started to roll it out, they say that they're rolling out 5G. First of all, it was Spark and Alexandra in the South Island, and I went and spoke down there about a week after they'd rolled it out. And Vodafone have got some what they call 5G in Auckland, Wellington, Christchurch and Queenstown. But what they're calling 5G at the moment is actually they're now sort of calling it 4.5G, so it's not quite 5th generation because it's not the microwave frequency. They're right on the edge of what we've already had, so we don't sort of know the full effect even of what it's going to be. But the scary thing is, even with this 4.5G, for example, in Queenstown, I had a call from a woman and she said, can't sleep anymore. My cat stopped meowing. My dog has just gone really anxious and just complete personality change. And when my son comes to my house, his nose bleeds all the time. And I said, gosh, doesn't sound very good. Has anything changed around your house? Oh, there's a big tower and they've been doing something to it. So it was just a few days before I went down to Alexandra to speak to them, so I flew into Queenstown Airport and went and had a look at her house. And the cell tower is just like 30 metres away, and between her house and the cell tower is a big camper van building. So it's a big metal roof building that's quite a high roof where they fit all these Maui camper vans or whatever company it is. And I think what's happening is the radiation is coming out of the tower and sort of bouncing off the metal roof and coming into the bedroom window, just the way it's directed. And I went and had a look, and I had the woman from the airport, the woman who was collecting me to talk in Alexandra, and we both went in the room, and I had this thing of, I have to get out of this room, like it was just this really strong feeling. And the woman with me, she went down as well, and she said to me, I had this feeling I had to get out of this room. So I hadn't said what I was feeling, but you could almost feel the hair standing up on your arm. It's like a really weird feeling. And so when the woman went away and she went and stayed at a friend's for a week, and she said, she felt fine again, son's nosebleed stopped, cat started meowing again, and the dog's personality came back to normal, but then they had to go back to Queenstown, went back to the house, dog wouldn't get out of the car and go in the house. She told his son not to even come back, and he went to stay with a friend because he'd just been so sick. Cat stopped meowing again, and she felt awful again. So, and meanwhile, the next door neighbours died. Now, we don't know, we're never going to get the data of what she died from or anything else, but they'd been started talking around their neighbours, and there's a lot of effects there. We're not going to be able to probably get an official study done. We tried to do that in Aruya where there was a radio tower and there was a lot of harm. It's really hard to get the information, let alone put it all together. But there are the warning signs, and there are the warning signs. We're hearing these stories of birds falling out of the trees. In Alexandra, Victoria, who's arranged my meeting down there, she said, we've got all these trees and they're dead on one side and blooming on the other side, and they're dead on the side with the radio tower, with the cell tower. So there's a lot of warnings, there's a lot of red flags to watch out for. Now, we can't prove that one is causing the other, but there's an awful lot of coincidences, and it's definitely a lot of what I call red flags worth looking into. The same in Auckland, where they were rolling out the Vodafone 5G, people were reporting a lot of heart problems in the areas that they were rolling it out. Now, maybe, we were imagining it and people are, and it does happen, the placebo effect with medicines. If you think something's a problem, you can your body starts playing tricks, and that's all possible. But there's a lot of warnings that it's really worth having a good old think about and just being really cautious with all this. And all around the world they're getting a lot of reports of these types of things. So we've only got what we call 4.5G. Now the next thing that's supposed to happen is the government is allocating the rights to use the spectrum for these microwave, shorter wavelength radiation. So at the moment, the way it works, they sort of allocate different wavelengths for different things, and they sell them off and they make some money out of allocating them. They won't tell us exactly when they're allocating them, but they've said early this year. We're saying to the government, why would you be allocating spectrum for something that we don't know if it's safe or not? Wouldn't you want to do the testing first and be sure of what's happening? Wouldn't you want to have a look and see what's happening in other countries where they're rolling it out and seeing if there is harm to trees, bees, people and anything else? What's the rush? Why wouldn't we just slow it down, take our time? Do we urgently need 5G? Now, do we know what 5G does? As far as I can tell, the only benefits that anyone's ever come up with, we can have driverless cars, we can have faster video game downloads, and we can have artificial intelligence, so we can have the Internet of Things, so that you can send messages through your house, and your fridge can talk to your smart meter, and your washing machine can talk to your smart meter and send data back to wherever it is at the power company, and they can sort of choose to turn things on and off. So are any of those things so critically important that we can't get by without them for, even a year? Let's just wait a year and see what happens. Let's wait 2 or 3 years and just get an idea of what's happening. Is it really that urgent? It's a real worry in New Zealand because we have ACC law, and a lot of other countries, if you can prove that you got harmed by something, you can sue the company that rolled it out. A lot of overseas companies like testing drugs and products in New Zealand because with ACC law, we can't sue for personal injury. So we get ACC, so you get 80% or 85% of your wage, whatever it is. But if you get harmed by a cell phone in America and you can prove it, you can go to court and you can claim $10 million or something for harm, And they don't really like those claims. So they come and test things in New Zealand because we can't sue. So we're a great free place for testing. We're not actually the lucky country that's getting all this technology. We're the suckers, we're the guinea pigs. So are they, when they're rolling out, do we really need it? And my answer to that, we're told the message actually with the road thing, safety before speed. It's actually quite a sensible message. We all know that message from driving, signs everywhere, safety before speed. Well, same message with these actually, safety before speed. If we want 5G, just to do it a little bit faster. And actually, the fibre optic cable, I think you've got it in Kaitaia. Fibre optic cable, most of the countries overseas are saying, if only we had fibre optic cable, we wouldn't need 5G. Because fibre optic cable is faster than 5G. It's more secure than 5G. We don't have all these issues of whether the telco companies can interfere with our data and steal our data. It's more reliable than 5G because 5G with the microwave radiation, just as in your microwave oven, it's really affected by water, so wet things cook faster. What they're telling us is if it's a rainy day, the 5G gets interfered with by all the moisture in the air and it doesn't work anymore. And the other really dumb thing about what they've got so far is 5G doesn't go through surfaces, so the problem with the trees, they're having to prune the trees, actually doesn't go through your building. So you have to have another transmitter on the inside of your building to transmit it on the inside. So what they're having to make are phones that switch between 4G and 5G. So if you're in a part of town that's got 5G while you're walking down the street, you can quickly download your movies if you really, really must. But as you walk into another part of town that hasn't got 5G, or as you come into the building, it has to switch back to 4G because the 5G doesn't go through walls and surfaces. So it's like, what is going on here? We're being sold this sort of amazing technology that we all have to have, and we're being shown all these videos of, you know, somebody rescuing giving a dog, I think, an operation in the desert or whatever. I don't really watch TV, but some kind of thing I'm told about what we need. But hang on, we've got fibre optic anyway. Our hospitals have got fibre optic, our businesses have got fibre optic. They don't actually need mobile technology to be able to do all the things that they need. So what is the agenda? What is driving the force behind that? And that's a question I don't know. There's a lot of speculation. Why are they pushing this so hard? There's a court case going on in America at the moment because they rolled out fibre optic and they said it was all for the public good, and then they found that part of the reason they wanted their fibre optic over there was to help them with their 5G, because there's something called backhaul. I don't quite get that technical side of it. There's something about transferring all the energy back again or something. But basically, and they're saying it's not fair that the telcos are basically getting that part of all the infrastructure paid for by the public. So there's a whole lot of issues about who pays for these things as well. But the starting message is, if you've got fibre optic cable or you've got access to it, it's faster, safer, more reliable, and you probably can work around the need for artificial intelligence and driverless cars. We certainly can in Nelson. I'm pretty sure you can in Kaitaia and pretty much the rest of New Zealand as well. So, you know, we've just got to, again, say, let's balance these things up. Balance up what we know that we want and need, and what we really need. We need health. We need reliable, you know, we need to look after our resources. There's a whole lot of things we might think we want, but actually if we're balancing it up against the health and the environment, we probably don't actually want them. We just, you know, they're not the priority. So one of the messages out of all this that I've got to is we all as communities need to start asking questions. Because if we sit back and trust what is happening, there's all these things happening to us that aren't very good for us. And there's not long-term thinking for our children and for our children's children. It's just short-term thinking for money. And it's not good for our communities, it's not good for our environment. And they get by because if you're a telco and you've got a lot of money, or if you're a pharmaceutical company, you've got a lot of money, or you can influence the system really well. You can go and have a meeting with the minister, you can go and do all the things you need to do to influence and carve a nice path out for yourself to do what you want to do. But if you're sitting in a rural community, it's very, very hard to get access to the decision makers. And you know, we brought Professor Lazinski, who's a world expert on radiation, to New Zealand through crowdfunding. And he came and spoke in Auckland, Hawke's Bay, Wellington and Nelson. And we invited the Minister of Health, the Minister of Education, the Minister of Communications, the Prime Minister's Science Advisor, and anyone else they wanted to come and meet with him to ask questions. Because here was a chance, you know, maybe they weren't getting the best advice from their advisors. Here was a chance for them to come and get the best information from one of the world experts. And he's not one of the kind of extreme view experts. He's a very middle of the road kind of cautious expert. And the Minister of Health, the Minister of Environment, the Minister of Communications and the Associate Minister of Health all said, oh, we're too busy. So, you know, they don't actually want this information. That's, the thing that really, you know, I thought maybe they were just misinformed by their officials, and let's put them right, let's give them some more information and they might change their mind. But they don't even want to know. They've got their own thing going on over there. So we've actually got to get smarter. We've given them a chance. We've given them a chance to listen and learn. We've got to get smarter about looking after ourselves because we actually can't trust them to look after us and look after our families and communities. You know, we've actually got to start thinking. So there's a lot of things we can do, and that's the good news part of this because it's kind of depressing otherwise, hearing all the stuff that's going on. So in terms of the cell phone, I've mentioned already, half an hour a day can cause brain tumours after 10 years exposure. And even the 10 years exposure, they know that it takes time for brain tumours to form. So if you have even something that's definitely going to cause a brain tumour, it probably won't show up for 10 years anyway because it's just all the processes in the brain and all the enzymes and DNA take time before it shows up generally. So we don't know how bad these things are going to be. But we do know that they cause harm, and we do know that the New Zealand standard doesn't protect against them at all at the moment. We should be way down that end where the Salzburg is, like 1,000th of the limit, not the end where we are. So we know enough to be cautious ourselves. If the government's not going to set a cautious standard, let's be cautious ourselves. Let's talk to our children, let's talk to our families and remind them, warn them. You can turn it off when you're not using it. You can turn it on to flight mode, and then it's not transmitting nearly as much. So, and then if you need it, you know, you might have to quickly make a phone call home or whatever. You can just turn it on and make a phone call, and then you can turn it back on to flight mode. It's actually quite cool because then you can have your whole day without your phone going all the time and just go and be like we used to be and just go and enjoy what we're actually doing without having this phone ringing all the time. So it's really, yeah, so all of those things. And when we carry it, when you read the guidelines that come with these things, they have a warning that says do not use or carry within, it's usually within 18 or 25 millimetres of your body. Now, it's not on the front page like a big warning, like on a cigarette packet. It's like, you know, page 27 and tiny writing somewhere halfway down the page. So they don't highlight this information. In a few places they do because they've had a big, where the councils have made a big stand in Berkeley in America, for example, they actually now have to have a warning, much like a cigarette bottle packet saying, do not, you know, avoid use whenever possible. This may cause brain tumours. So they actually, it's starting to happen around the world, but we are way behind here on these warnings. But that's why we need to get ourselves informed and you know, make sure that our kids are really cautious. Because the other thing is especially important for kids because first of all they're smaller and so it goes much further into their body. And secondly because after 10 years, there's an increased risk of brain tumours. After 20 years is a bigger risk. After 30 years is a bigger risk. And 40 years an even bigger risk. So if you're already 60 or 70 when you start using it, you know, there's not much of a risk at all of getting harm in the next 10 or 20, 30 years. But if you're 5 when you start using it, by the time you're 15, it's already a significant increased risk. By the time you're 25, it's more risk again. 35, you should be, you know, having families and homes and whatever. Suddenly you got a brain tumour and you didn't know because you've been using it for 25 years already. So it doesn't mean everyone's going to get one, it just means you've got an increased risk. So let's take care against doing it. In our homes with Wi-Fi, you know, a lot of people have Wi-Fi in their homes, and look, I have Wi-Fi too, I use it all the time as well, but you can turn it off when you don't need it. You can set it up in your home that it's not next to where you're working. So it's, you know, if you, every time you double the distance, you're halving or quartering the amount of exposure. So don't have it right next to where you're sitting. Have it at the other end of your, at least at the other end of your room, preferably at the other end of the house, and have it so you can turn it off. Because that really reduces the exposure, and definitely don't have it anywhere near your bedroom because it really interferes with your sleep hormones. A lot of people can't sleep from radiation. They don't understand why they can't sleep anymore. Then they find out that someone put a smart meter in the wall behind their bed and didn't tell them, or something like that. And when they realise and they change it all around again, it fixes the problem. So it's just being aware. Be aware of smart meters, but I don't know if you've got them up here. A lot of the power companies have been putting them in people's home. And but it complies with the New Zealand standard, so there's nothing to worry about. Well, no, the New Zealand standard is not protecting us against all these other effects, so there is something to worry about. if you haven't got a smart meter, tell your power company that you don't want a smart meter and put a sign on your power box. If you have got one, get rid of it if you can. It's quite hard, but it's possible, especially if you get a letter from your doctor if you think it's causing harm. But also rearrange your house so that you're not sleeping next to it, so your body, because what happens with all of this radiation, your body adapts to it, but it adapts not to its normal self, it adapts to sort of deal with it, and you'll find that your body's working in different ways. And for some people, after a certain amount of exposure, they get what's called electrosensitive or electrohypersensitive. And they actually get really quite bad symptoms from radiation. Headaches, inability to concentrate, really itchy skin, a whole range of sort of allergic type symptoms. And the telcos will tell you that it's people just imagining it. But we're the first people that got electrohypersensitive were the people that were the techno guys working in the Nokia factory in Sweden. And they were the guys that loved all this stuff. And they were surrounded by it. And they were inventing all these new phones and methods and systems. And they all started to get this allergy and allergic and chronic fatigue type symptoms and all sorts of things. And they realised they were getting hypersensitive to it. So it's actually something that your body, we're all a bit different. We can all stand a certain amount of exposure, but after a while it's too much for our body. So the less we have, the longer generally we can go without getting any of those symptoms. There are some concerns even about electricity and the changes in the body. And overseas, a lot of countries are a lot more cautious than us about the way they wire up their homes, and they don't have wires near their beds, and all sorts of thought goes into it that isn't built into our system. So, you can't say anything's absolutely safe, but what you can say is let's at least avoid the risks that we are aware of, and definitely the information I've seen, hardwired is a lot safer than the wireless. But, I can't promise it's totally safe. So just in terms of what you can do, the phone minimise, wireless minimise, and then, so that's things you can do to kind of, and raise awareness of your family, to your family and your friends, and just talk to people, like go home after this and talk to your friends and say, hey, did you know? There's all this stuff. And it's not just me saying it, there's any number of websites, when you know what you're looking for, there's any number of websites with loads of information, but you will notice a really clear pattern. If it's a telco or a government-sponsored website, they will basically be telling you it's safe and don't worry. If it's an independent website, or even the insurers won't cover harm from radiation because they say the risk is too great. The risk of claims is too great. So they're pretty safe websites to look at. The Austrian insurers have done some really good stuff on it. I think the Swiss ones as well. So pick just whatever information you read, look at who wrote it, because that will basically influence the threat of it.
What I'm asking is how do we stop it? Can we stop it? And is it stoppable?
Yeah. Hey, look, it's not easy to stop it, but anything can be done. So one country has already stopped it, and a lot of towns have stopped it in their own towns around the world, and provinces have stopped it, like in Switzerland and Brussels. They've at least said, no, we don't want it until it can be proven to be safe. And so there are places where the governments are listening to the people. New Zealand isn't showing any sign of that so far, but we've got an election year this year. An election year is the best year for getting action on these kind of things, because it's the 1 year we have a lot of meetings with politicians. They all front up and can ask questions. Just imagine, at every meeting they go to around the country, they're asked about 5G. Why are you rolling out 5G? We don't want it. How do we stop it? So
we actually have the power.
We totally have the power.
We'll get on Facebook. Because after I finish this, if you're honest with me, I'm going home. My family didn't know, get on there, I'll do it live, and I'll explain everything you see.
Awesome. And that's the power. The power is, if I stand up and no one turns up to my meeting, I can't do much. I come here, all of you here, how much power is in this room? Unbelievable power. Because with all of us, and then everybody, all of us know, if everybody talks to the people they know and their families, you spread the word like a massive healthy virus. You know, we can do a lot. And especially election and also our councils. Now, our councils have all been told, I'm not sure if there's any councillors here today, but if they are, welcome, it's awesome that you've come. The councils have all been told by central government that stay out of this is not your job, we don't want you involved in this, butt out. Now, I'm going around the country saying to communities, that's not okay. Our councils are elected to represent our interests. And our councils have got a law that actually just came in last year saying part of their duty is community wellbeing. And our councils are responsible for health and safety. And if anyone's dealt with businesses and the health and safety obligations, you know that it's an obligation. You've got to identify risks, and once you've identified them, you've got to manage them, remove them, do whatever you can. So our councils have got duties like that. The government's taken away the resource management processes. So if you want to put a big sign outside your house, you need a resource consent. But if you want to put a cell tower outside your house and radiate everybody, you're exempt. You know, this is how crazy it is. But we're doing a few things on that. We've gone to the government, to what's called the Regulations Review Committee in Parliament, who review all the regulations, and we've said, look, these regulations don't meet parliamentary rules because these regulations do not promote sustainable management. How can it promote sustainable management when you're authorising radiation to be spread all over our communities, and not only we can't prove it's safe, but we actually can start to prove now that it's not safe. And there's all these people with harm already in Frankton all around the country. People are coming forward with harm. So those regulations need to be revoked, and let's start again. Let's treat it as a community issue, just like everything else is, and let the community, and there might be some community in New Zealand that doesn't mind having radiation outside their schools and their homes. They might have good reasons for that, I don't know. But I'm pretty sure the communities I've spoken to are saying, well, actually, hang on a minute, we want much more thought into this. We don't need it now, we want it to slow down. And it should be a community decision. We all live here, and our council should be representing us, not just taking orders from someone in Wellington that doesn't even know what they're talking about on this issue anyway. The other thing with the councils, what we're doing is, if you've got a cafe or something and you want to put a coffee table out on the street, you need a licence and permission from the council. They can say yes or no, or well, you can have it on Saturdays, you can have it sometimes, but not always. So how come someone can put a cell tower out on the street without a permission? And how come the council hasn't got the right to say yes, no, or move it, or turn it off at night, or whatever else with a cell tower? Of course they can, they just don't want to. So we need to tell our council that it is your job and you do need to get involved. And what happened when New Zealand went nuclear free way back in the 70s, when people went and spoke to their councils and got together, we want our council to go nuclear free. And it happened all around the country, you know, some of the more active communities went nuclear free. And when 67%, 2/3 of the communities around New Zealand councils went nuclear free, the government finally had the courage to make a stand and at least say that they were nuclear free New Zealand. So it is a way, it's an easier way sometimes of getting the government to listen.
One thing that I've been made aware of is that there's a lot of people out there with money, and then there's a lot of people without money. I feel that a lot of the people that haven't got that much money are being paid to shut up. Because, you know, we turned a blind eye for about a week or so, then next minute there were 5G towers over here on one of our maungas. Our iwis were not consulted with us. That mountain over there to us as tangata whenua is waihi tapu. It means a whole lot more to us than a bit of dirt, a pile of dirt. And we weren't even consulted about it. So I'm listening to all the things, you know, the council, they're obligated for the betterment of the people.
Yep.
Well, why are they putting that up there without doing any tests and stuff? But you know, I think it's really about the power of the people. Not whether you're tangata whenua, not whether you're Pākehā, you're simply a person, and this is no good for us.
Exactly.
So please keep an eye out on Facebook. They put Facebook down because it's all trumped up and this and that, but it's our way of communicating. Keep an eye on Facebook. I'm preparing to occupy that maunga not too far away, because something needs to be done about this to raise more attention, to get them to pay attention to what us, the people, want. We're going to have to do stuff like that.
Yeah,
Sure,
absolutely, yeah, absolutely. And connecting is the way like I said before, if just one person does it, you can make a difference, one person can. But if 10 people or 100 people or 1,000 people, and you keep doing it and you're taking turns that no one's going away until it's changed. I've done it before in Parliament, you know, people sat outside, it was a fishing issue, they took their boat, we're not going home until this is sorted, until we talk to the minister. You know, if you just go along for a couple of hours, they go, oh fine, it's you today, someone else tomorrow, someone the next day. But if people go like they've done down near Auckland there, if you go and you stay, then it makes a really big difference. And more people come and more people come and more people come. Then it's a really big difference.
They brought in a government act, I think John King brought it in to exempt cell phone towers from resource consent applications.
Yeah.
But being an election year, if we pressure like Labour, Greens, New Zealand First, and all whatever other parties to reverse that,
Yeah.
and then give the councils back the power
Yeah.
to let the people tell the councils if they can do it or not.
Yeah.
And that would put a big hold, a big slowdown on forestry, wouldn't it?
I'm just interested to know, can I see, we invited councillors, we invited the mayor, are any of them here?
No.
Hello?
No.
So,
Yeah.
talk about the
I'll just answer, because we've made a complaint, actually the Outfields Party has made a complaint to Parliament about those regulations and asked for a formal inquiry to set aside those regulations.
Right.
So we did that I did it to coincide with the Global Day protest, so it was like done late on Friday night to go out on Saturday last week. And it was actually done by Trevor Mallard in 2008. He did the first version of that, and then they've been updated with Nick Smith and updated again in 2016, which I think is Nick Smith again. It's my local MP in Nelson, who keeps getting these jobs, and every time it's never good for the community. That wants every decision to be nationalised so that the government, just a few people can make the decisions. The opposite of what we're all saying here. We're the people, we live here, we want to make the decisions here. So, you know, it's just got more and more nationalised and less people involved in this thing. But it's a simple thing. They have their first meeting is on the 11th of February, and then we've asked for a formal hearing, and what I would love to do is have hundreds of people asking their MPs and asking the members of the Regulations Review Committee, what are you doing about this? When are you going to have a hearing? We want to come, we want it on TV so we can watch and, you know, make it really big. Because the bigger it is, the harder it is. Because what they do is they go, oh, this is really important, go on, stamp, finish. We can't let them do that. We've all got to tell them it's really important and just keep reminding them. It's not democracy. We're told we've got democracy. Well, if we've got democracy, where is it?
It's gone years ago.
Yeah, and it's not a new thing. I mean, this has been going on, but we've now, I think what's happened to 5G is an issue that affects a lot of people all around the country. Like a lot of issues are just a local issue, or it might affect rural people but not city people, or people in one part of one city. But this is affecting everybody in New Zealand pretty much, and around the world. So it's an issue that's bringing big meetings all around the country, and people are angry. Why? We don't want this radiation outside our homes. So it's an issue that we can, if we all work together and support each other. We've all got different skills. That's the thing. We've all got different skills and we've all got different networks, so we can get information out far and wide.
What we decide is what they're going to end up with. So,
And you know, the radiation is one thing,
Yeah.
but just the sitting down playing games and on a little machine instead of kicking a ball and going fishing and climbing trees and all those things, that's a huge effect.
well, I believe everybody's just following each other, you know what I mean? Your kid has to have a cell phone.
Yep.
Your child does not need a cell phone, you know what I mean?
Yep.
They don't need it. So anyway, that's all I wanted to say. I wanted to put it out there. So people can let everyone else know that. Thank you.
We could all probably live with them without them if we needed to. Everyone writes to your cell phone company, your internet provider, and say, we don't want 5G. If you're going to impose 5G, and I'll close my cell phone number, I'll close my email account, stop using it altogether, and live without it.
Yeah, well that's actually an extension. What I've been saying is tell tell them that you're going to change to a company that's not going to roll out 5G, that's committed not to.
Right.
So at the moment, Vodafone and Spark are saying we definitely want 5G. 2 Degrees are saying we're delaying, but they're still putting a whole lot of extra cell towers around the place and with no regard on people's homes or anything else, so they're not really any better. Actually, Chorus, who have done the fibre optic cable, they have said they were doing something to the cable to make it work better for other services as well. So that's definitely worth looking into. They just announced it quite recently. And you're right, if none of them will listen, well, don't use any of them.
Yeah.
Have you talked to health and safety at all about that?
Yeah.
Because this is an interesting, it's not safe for kids to fly through,
It's,
but it's safe for them to.
and it's one of the sad things about health and safety that they tend to focus more on the physical thing. If there's a hole in the ground, if your knee's bleeding, that's a disaster. But if your brain's full of cancer, then we won't really worry about that 'cause it's a bit trickier. And it's an education thing. I've done it. It's the same with chemicals. They don't like dealing with chemicals. It's too hard. I mean, we've been putting a lot of pressure on them with that, and it all just gets lost and bogged down. But if enough people raise it, and that's the other thing to do. Ask questions. So one thing we can do is Official Information Act. The Official Information Act is awesome. You can ask anybody in the government a question or any number of questions, and they must give you all of the information that they hold. And if it's not their job, they have to give it to whichever government department it is. Now, we did it with DOC because DOC weren't answering our questions about poisons. And it was a bit accidental, to be honest, but it turned out that loads of people started asking questions. We actually bogged them down, and they got into major trouble. The Ombudsman then did an inquiry of them to say, well, why are you not answering questions in time? So they all got into trouble, and they had to explain. And then when they started not giving us stuff, the Ombudsman was on to them. So if you go to the Ombudsman and say, hey, what's going on? And all of a sudden it would come through after all. So that is one really, really powerful tool. It's basically the Minister of Health, the Minister for the Environment, the Minister of Technology, but then also the Minister of Education. Why are we having radiation in our schools? Why do you assume it's safe when there's no evidence at all that it's safe? There's no evidence of harm. The Minister of WorkSafe, ask them questions. What are you doing about it? Especially because the standard itself says it doesn't protect against all these other biological effects, it doesn't protect against pacemakers, what effect of teachers, all these different businesses that are affected by it.
Is there any way you can measure the radiation? Like, you have a voltage meter?
Yeah, you can buy a meter. Go on the brochure, the 5g3.org.nz. I'm pretty sure they've got a list of ones that you can order that they know work quite well. But they cost like.
You can go on eBay to buy, and you can go on YouTube to find out about information about that particular analyzer. You know what I mean? You have somebody speak back about that analyzer. So you can suss out what you want. And I do have but yeah, my one was off eBay and it was around 400, but I think that they shoot right up. Yeah.
Kia ora, concerned human beings in this group. On behalf of Waimahana Yacht Club, we don't have a yacht. We don't have a club, but we access internet. Over 12 months ago, I was approached by a telecom company to erect a couple of towers on our land, on our Finland. They haven't come back and they work for Chorus. Information they were explained to me is that the government has given them the okay to put towers on DOC land. For you unfamiliar with DOC, Department of Crooks, we challenged them and the government in 2005 to the ownership of the land for them to do stuff. In this court in Kaitaia, the Commissioner of Crown Land perjured himself in their own courtroom. We went back to our whenua, 8,500 acres, and we stood on it, today. a couple of years after that, they were willing to bring the fibre optic cable to Kaitaia through our land. We said, we don't have a problem with that. How much does the hapu get of the traffic, the commerce that goes through it? For now till eternity. Because we didn't have a problem with that. So the information we're hearing now, fibre optic cable is far better than the microwaves. More safer. All I can see, and you've already explained, see that, and I know, 5G needs to see one tower to another. Hence, you've already seen, they're going to have them 100 metres apart. So they're going to go through, whether it be the cities or through the rural areas. If you see this happening, you need to say something. Because that's the only way it's really going to work. But they've already done most of it already. I've seen enough YouTube, whatever, for the damage it has been doing, especially overseas. The trees, birds, bees falling out. Yeah. I'm concerned about all my hoppers. What am I going to leave them if I don't stand up? I say to you, if you're that concerned and you see these things happening, and you have whānau in your, that are with the telcos, ask them if they know what they're doing, if they're actually doing it. All I say, well, behind their suite at the moment, even without the club. Anyway, thank you.
And the one good thing is, if they turn them on, they can turn them on. You know, even if they put them up, they can take them down. They don't want to do that, but they can do that.
I just want to make one point. We've got an election year this year, and that's great. But they've put up those two referenda, you know, marvellous distraction. So to make 5G out of the conversation, it's going to be trying to get it. Because they've got dangled those two issues to entertain everybody and distract them.
And they do, that's what they do. But, and they choose, they kindly choose the election issues for us. That's what they, you know, well no, it's our election. We're going to choose things. We don't care what you think of the election issues. We're going to choose what election issues we want.
Kia ora whanaunga. Hei, nā mihi te kōrero whanaunga, tau toko mai. Because it is about our next generation, our tamariki. But one thing that I'm really annoyed with is that the information is not being put out there for everyone to know about. You know, we can't trust the government. But in saying that, I used to be the head of security for the mana party throughout the country. I used to be the head of advertising for Hone Harawera. But this is when I've walked away from politics. Now I'm going to ask, is the Outdoors Party making this a policy of this no 5G?
Yeah.
Well, then it will have my vote. Kia ora. Yeah.
And we need more people like you standing up and saying it, but connecting, because that's the thing, you know, you can tell every meeting, but people that are out in the communities telling people, that's so important as well.
Where do the Greens stand on this? Where do the Greens stand on this?
The Greens like radiation, and they like poison at the moment, so I don't know what's going on there. Should we do one more question and then we might maybe, okay, two more questions and then maybe we'll stop, and I'm really happy to just answer questions over it.
I just wanted to add to the meeting about toxic sensitivity, and this is one of the things that we're getting from 5G, and it's following a pattern of chemical sensitivity, which is something that I know quite a lot about. I'm somebody who's been long-term chemical poisoned, and I've studied it for a couple of decades. And what we're seeing, and what really concerns me, is one of the things that's causing chemical sensitivity is low-level long-term exposure to them, which is just small levels that don't actually make us sick. And over a long period of time, that starts to create a chemical sensitivity, and then people start having issues. Now, this is one of the things that I'm worried about with 5G, because the symptoms reported on the 5G sensitivity is very, very similar. And so one of the things I'm worried about, and I think everyone needs to be aware of, is the long-term, low-level exposure of the 5G is probably going to create all sorts of sensitivities and health problems in society. Thanks, I just wanted to
Thank you for that. Yeah, and really, I mean, one of the things, our medicine system is quite good at dealing if you have a heart attack or you break your leg or something. But we've got this massive problem with chronic ill health, with autoimmune disorders and all sorts of like annoying, chronic pain. We don't have good ways of dealing with those things, and a lot of those things are related to chemical exposure and radiation exposure and other sort of stress things.
Can I just add just a little bit something? I went in to have a blood test recently, and because I'm quite aware now of what's going on, I was just looking out the window and I was like, LED light, LED light, LED light, LED light, and Wi-Fi in the hospital. Well, there didn't used to be Wi-Fi in the hospital. I mean, people go to the hospital because they're not unwell. And there's a lot of people using phones. I mean, I don't tell them, but I just see it. In there, so there's radiation, and with radiation also, say you've got a metal roof, it actually keeps it in there. Yeah.
Sorry, talk about the range from 3 to 300.
I'll just pick up on what Michelle was saying. There's one area in New Zealand that's had a really major proven problem with radiation. It's called Aruia in Christchurch. It's on the northeast corner of Christchurch. Aruia, it's a northeast suburb of Christchurch. It's sort of just on the fringe where the rural lifestyle blocks are starting there. And there's a really big radio tower there that transmits AM and FM. They've been to the Environment Court and everything else, and as a result of all of the harm that was suffering there, so people were getting sick, horses were getting sick, and horses were getting cooked foods where turned out to be the metal. Everywhere there was metal is a multiplier effect. So their metal halters where the buckles and things were, they were getting burns. The people that lived there were getting actually burns where their fillings were, and burns from the metal on their underwire brass, and from their glasses, metal burns. So they arranged the health study, and the preliminary health study came back and identified clusters of harm associated with this radiation. And then the funding was pulled. And so the final study was never done. And this is the type of thing that happens. It's so hard to get any funding. If we say we want some funding to do a study on radiation, you won't get it. But the people that are making the money out of it, if the burden is shifted to them to prove that it's safe, then there's an incentive for them to spend some money on testing safety and finding safer ways of doing things. But while there's no obligation on them and they can use it until it's proven to be harmful, they'll just keep on doing it. They're not going to do any research, are they? Because the research is going to end their business. So, all of these systems are all kind of back to front. But in Aruia they had a lot of the insects went away, the rodents went away, the people got sick, the horses got well again when they went elsewhere, much like the lady in Queenstown, and then sick again when they came back. And also the trees in the direct line of the radiation beam, especially the microwave message ones from point to point, they died, and the leaves, you could actually see a dead line through the trees in line with where it's going. We just had reports from Gisborne, there's a forest there with radiation, a tower in the middle, and apparently if you're up in a helicopter you can see the dead lines in line where the radiation beams are coming out.
So that's why forest fires.
Well, yeah, look, it's certainly an interesting thought. It's certainly not healthy for the forest. And there's also the issue, with Kari dieback and some of these other diseases. Who knows if it's caused it, but it's certainly not healthy. So, it's a combination.
At least it would pit one industry against the other.
Yeah, well, it's true. It's true. Make them, yeah.
So you talk about how they can turn it up.
Just with the radiation, it's really hard to get it tested or anything because they can turn it up, like we talked about with the LED lights and things. They can turn it up and they can turn it down. And their people who are doing the monitoring know when it's getting done, so they can turn it down when it's getting monitored, and then they can turn it up again later. It's just next to impossible.
One thing that you mentioned earlier was basically that there's a cell phone tower here, there's a tree over here, this tree here is completely gone dry. This part here is still spreading green leaves. Now, if you put that in comparison to how much bigger the fires were in Australia just recently, well, can we connect these problems together?
Yeah. Well, for me, it's like a jigsaw, you know, let's start putting in the pieces that we've got. And when you're doing a jigsaw, you might only have a tenth of the pieces, and you can start to get a little bit of an idea, and you get, you know, maybe a third of the pieces, and you're starting to actually get quite a good idea of the picture, even though you haven't got every single piece yet. Whereas the way they're doing it at the moment, they're basically saying, until you've got every single piece locked in place, let's just pretend that we can't see any of that, and we'll just pretend that it's still safe. So that's the sort of analogy of what we've got on. I say there's plenty of red flags, there's plenty of warnings. The precautionary approach is not saying don't do anything, but just just think about it, talk about it, ask the communities. You know, we used to have smoking rooms so that everyone else didn't have to be exposed to the smoke. We can have Wi-Fi rooms, and people that want the Wi-Fi can go to the room, and everybody else doesn't have to be exposed.
Yeah.
You know, there's loads of different things we can do when we start thinking about it. Now, this lady over here has been trying to ask me questions for ages.
That's all right. I was just going to say that if you want to remove the smart meter, you can do it through Nova Energy. They are happy to have it taken out. It'll cost you $55. I think you have to join up with them, but they're the only company I know of in New Zealand that allow these days those smart meters. And the other thing was, if you choose to go Wi-Fi 3 and use the Ethernet cable, so you turn your Wi-Fi button off on your hub, it's still radiating out radiation. People don't realise that. You have to ring Spark or whoever you're with and ask them to turn it off at their end. They can do it, they've done it. Vodafone's done it for me and Spark's done it for me. But it was like a 9-month battle. So you just say, I want the Wi-Fi off at your end. Can you turn it off, please? So, yeah.
So do you mean if you turn it off at night?
If you turn the whole hub off, then
The
that's
modem.
fine. But if you're just wanting to turn the Wi-Fi off and thinking that you haven't got radiation going on now, you actually have.
So turning the modem off doesn't turn it off.
Turning the modem off will turn the whole thing off. But if you just want to turn the Wi-Fi off,
Oh, I see.
yeah, that still radiates in some way.
So you can be hardwired. You also need to turn it off on your computer. So if you can
Yeah.
get, the old computers used to be able to plug the Ethernet in. A lot of them these days you need an adapter for it, but you can still get them and plug it in. But you need to remember to turn the Wi-Fi off on your computer then, so that the computer's not still radiating and stuff.
Any new appliance, you need to switch it off at the walls, or it's a smart device in there.
Yeah, well, the new appliances are set up for this Internet of Things, so that your smart meter talks to all your appliances around your house. Yeah. Yeah. So you've basically got all this Wi-Fi and Bluetooth zooming around inside your house talking to each other. So the old appliances didn't have that, but that's the way they're heading, and it's getting hard to get ones that don't have that. But again, you know, if everybody goes into Briscoe's or whatever shop and says, look, I want one that doesn't do that, if there's enough community pressure, presumably they'll get them.
I've got chip pulled out of my smart meter, so does that take to engage everything on?
Look, I think it does, but you've got to be careful, because when you take back your power, it's quite a good documentary to watch about smart meters if you're interested in smart meters, but it's got a lot of other radiation information too. And they showed that the companies were going around saying we've taken it out, but then when they had their monitor next to it, it was still radiating. So there must be more than one thing in them that affects it.
One question, please. Is there any future for the old landline phone? Because
Yeah.
I've been more or less called a dinosaur for not wanting cell phones and computers and every other thing. And they're going to price that landline out of the system by the sound of it. Yeah, so I'm just wondering, is there going to be, can we stop that happening?
Well, one thing I should say too, with a landline, you still need you don't get a cordless phone, because if you've got a cordless phone, it's pretty much as bad as cell phone.
Yes, yes.
So you need a hardwired phone, and the old copper wires they're trying to get rid of because the government did that deal with copper wires that they could only charge a certain price per month when they switched over to telecom.
Yeah.
But the telcos are trying to get rid of the copper wires, so they're trying to get everybody on fibre optic, which is better than Wi-Fi, but it's kind of good if a few people stay on the copper wire so that they can't actually cut them. Once they get the whole community off, they cut it. No one can go back on it again.
Yeah, well, I'm just a bit concerned there, you know, they might cut us out of there. That's what they're trying to. I'm a dinosaur, that's all I'm being told.
Well, you might be ahead of your time as well, and you know, another 10 years we'll be back again.
Probably be a long-living dinosaur.
Well, I
We've
hope
been
so.
talking a lot about defensive measures, and it's important to acknowledge and recognize that there are people in the world who want to know what everyone's doing all the time. And they ultimately have a great deal of influence over
People are trying to get rid of us
you
all.
realistically get the vote. So, you know, while these defensive measures are somewhat salubrious, unless there's a complete shift of consciousness and the people rise up as a single body, we're going to remain under the control of these people that really, really have control.
Agenda 21.
Yeah, it's really hard to get information on the mainstream media about anything that they've got going on, and it's so difficult. I've been involved in this 1080 petition against cruelty, against cruel use of poisons, and they're coming up towards the end of the time. They tried to advertise it through the New Zealand Herald and through stuff with Fairfax. And they went through the process of how much it was going to cost and what days and adverts and everything. And then Fairfax came back and said, oh no, we're not going to run those ads because people might think we're supporting the petition. And hang on, this is media censorship, this is not okay. And we wrote a really full-on letter to them, pointing out it was media censorship and copying the Minister of Justice and the parliamentary chapter was organising. And so that was sent away about 6 o'clock at night, which was 4 o'clock in the Sydney time. By 10 o'clock in the morning, they rang back and said, actually, it was a big misunderstanding, and we will now run the ads. But you see, this is kind of like, you're lucky you've got a local newspaper that runs things, but you can't get anything about 5G in stuff or on TV, or if you do, it's like, there's all these mad people complaining, but you know it's safe. But you can't get information out there, so look after your media, you know, support the local media, where people actually talk about things and publish things and share information. It's so valuable, it's so hard for media.
Someone asked shortly before, where do the Green Party stand on this? Well, I was involved with the Green Party years ago. I know they refused to look at the science evidence of harm, anything at all. They flatly refused to. They're so anti-science, they will not look at science evidence of anything at all. Fluoride, GE, nothing. So, and we've had enough of it. And I'm going to write to the Green Party saying that if they don't make banning 5G an election issue, an absolute promise that if they get in a coalition, that 5G will stop, I will not vote for them. I'm going to write to all the MPs and tell them that, and if everyone else does, and enough people in the country do this, they will, for the first time ever, they will look at something with science evidence of harm for the benefit of the whole country, and they will stop it, and they'll make an election issue and say, if we get back in, we won't allow 5G. But it will take everyone in this room, and everyone you know, tell them to do it. Write them repeating letters, photocopy them and send them to all of them, free post.
And when you convince them and they agree to do it, get them to sign a commitment that they...
That's right, make an absolute promise on your election campaign.
And realistically, the less green the Green Party is, the larger footprint they have in government and the more money they have to finance their campaigns. I mean, we've got to be realistic about who really has the power.
Kia ora tātou. I just want to point one thing out. You know, Green Party does have the right intentions, but you have to remember about the MMP. So basically you've got the Green Party, you've got New Zealand First. they can't make no decisions because they're actually coalition to the boss, which is Labour. So anything that they decide has to be cleared by Jacinda. So you've got all these three parties that are coalition to one another. You know, it makes them all no good.
But that's why they do have the power, because if Labour need the Greens in here, and the Greens have made a promise, then Labour will have to accept that we need the Greens, so we have to comply with their promise, and we will stop 5G.
All things have to be finalised by the
and
end
New Zealand first to stop 5G as well. If the Greens make it an absolute promise, if we tell them that if they don't stop 5G, they won't get back in, and they'll be finished. No more Greens, because I won't get in again after.
I think that will tell
If you get enough pressure, it's tough.
Now, as part of our tangata whenua tikanga, we always have a waiata after the final karakia. Anyone got a waiata? Kia ora whananga.
Ko te triti, o waitangi te triti o Aotearoa. Hiki te akirunga, mo tuhake ranga tiratanga tupu iho. Tino ranga tiratanga tupu iho. Tino ranga tiratanga tupu iho. Ara tupu iho. Ko te triti, o waitangi, kia kaha kia mau.
Kia ora tātou, kia ora tātou, kia ora tātou katoa.